Hello, everybody. Welcome to Ladder Daily Digest. Today we have Morgan Higdon with her show, Understanding You. And we'll start out by talking about Morgan a little bit.
Awesome. Yeah, so I grew up in St. Louis, Missouri, and both of my parents were Mormon. My dad was a convert and like in his early 20s, so it I was just raised like a typical you know, both Mormon parents, very they were both very devout for, most of my childhood until my dad ended up leaving actually when I was 18. But yeah, so I grew up Mormon, and I think the interesting thing about being Mormon out in a place like Missouri is that you're one of the strong and few. There's
You
not
have
a
to
lot of
represent.
you.
You have to represent.
Yes, there
Set
was
the
very
example.
much a lot of pressure to I remember when we'd go to young women's activities, we'd go like rock climbing or something. They'd be like, guys, remember, we're representing the church. So take this seriously, right? Don't mess it up. So there was very much this camaraderie within the group as far as we're the strong few that believe this. And so yeah, so I grew up very devout.
Did
I
you
had
have
a
some leadership callings in young women?
Oh yeah, so I was almost always the beehive president, the Miami's president, the whatever. And it very much was I was having so many problems at home emotionally and with my family and with the dysfunction going on that church kind of was this outlet for me where I could feel like I was making a difference and I could feel important and like I mattered. And so I really clung to it really tightly, and I really allowed it to become a big part of my personality as a result of not feeling stable at home, not feeling stable in who I was. So being Mormon very much was like my whole life. It was my personality. It was how I knew how to navigate the world. And my friends in high school actually would call me Mormon instead of Morgan as like a joke on, Morgan and Mormon sound similar. But it just goes to show how deeply ingrained this was in my personality that my friends would refer to me as Mormon, like as if it was my name. So I was deeply engrossed in the lifestyle and I loved it. At the time, I loved it.
Right. And you did seminary. Did you have to do early morning seminary?
I did, and I hated it so much. It was so hard because in a place like Missouri where you don't have a bunch of Mormons around, you have to do early morning seminary, so everyone has to meet before the earliest kids' school meets. So you're meeting at like 5 in the morning so that everyone get together so that everyone can go to their different school districts afterward. And it was a very miserable experience because I was very sleep deprived and exhausted between school, and there were times where I was working too, and I was really involved in our theater programs as well as being really involved with young women's and the church stuff. So I was exhausted and did not enjoy seminary very much.
Right. You mentioned there were problems at home. Did you have any outside professional support at all? When was the first time you got, I don't know, therapy or anything like that? Did
Yeah,
you?
it wouldn't have been until college. And my parents definitely, I think, had kind of a negative stigma with therapy. And especially my mom's fear was that a therapist would tell us things that were contrary to what the church was telling us, and that we would then maybe trust a therapist instead of, following all the rules. And so I think that kind of prevented it. Also, there was a lot of money issues too, so I think in part they didn't feel like they could afford the professional help, so I think it was kind of a combination of all of that.
Yeah, I think that sometimes, parents might think, well, the kid's just going through a phase, they'll grow out of it, or kids are resilient and they'll be able to overcome anything we throw at them or whatever. And our modern sensibilities now uh, tell us that we need professional help. In fact, my daughter-in-law said that the bishop recently announced that all members can get free counseling if they need it.
Really?
And I was like, wow, that's different, because it used to be kind of like a sliding scale, like what can you afford to pay kind of a thing,
Oh,
and
wow.
it would be subsidies maybe, but that was surprising to me. And
That's
so
awesome.
that's pretty good. So I'm actually going to try and get an appointment with my bishop and see if I can get some counseling services, because, I
Wow.
did a lot of tithing over my life. And so might
Oh,
as well
I understand
um,
that. Oh,
return on the
I
investment.
I mean, I was lucky that we got out when, we didn't have to pay nearly as much, because I got out in my, mid-20s, but man, yeah, I don't envy, your tithing
What,
investment.
what actually caused you to question and then eventually, you know, decide to stop attending or whatever?
So when I turned 18, my parents got divorced, and at the same time, my dad told us he didn't believe. And that was kind of probably the first stone to kind of fall into place that ended up kind of knocking things over for me. I was devastated by my parents, getting divorced. And I just remember thinking my whole life, families can be together forever. And then it was like, just kidding. And it
Yeah.
absolutely wrecked me. It made me feel really unsafe and freaked out and like I wasn't sure. If you don't have your family like in heaven, like what good is heaven? Like it really affected me very deeply. And my dad not believing really confused me. And I remember that, it was my first really exposure to someone who was, like, ex-Mormon, followed not too long after by an aunt of mine, and I just think it started turning wheels in my head of, like, my dad still loves me. My dad is treating me really good. My dad is, like, really kind to me. He's there for me, and I was surprised because I thought like, because he was ex-Mormon, he was going to have, like, a different demeanor, and he was going to be less loving, and I was feeling that.
Influenced by Satan.
Yes, like, he was gonna be doing crazy things, and, like, if anything, I just felt like he was more there for us after that, and I think it's because he was taking better care of himself, you know? And so it just, it surprised me, and then I started to experience the same thing with an aunt of mine who had left the church, like, seeing what a kind and loving person she was, seeing how she was improving her life and how she was, um being spiritual in beautiful ways that were not relevant to Mormonism, and I was just looking at that and thinking to myself, like, I have a hard time thinking God is upset with her because she's a good person, she's being loving, she's being kind, like, it just didn't make sense to me that, like, why would God be mad at her for not being Mormon? But there was just this other part of me that was like, "But he has to be mad at her because she's not, you know."
Obeying.
Yeah, like, she would sir maybe he's not mad at her, but, like, at least she would be better off if she was Mormon, right? So then this was followed by my husband leaving the church, and I remember, so I got married in 2013, and I was 19, so really young, and he just got off his mission, so, like, we met, we dated for, like, 3 months, got engaged, got married 3 months later, like, it was all really fast, the typical, Mormon marriage, and 2 years into our marriage, we were still doing college, didn't have kids yet or anything, and he, like, tells me he doesn't believe anymore, and I'm wrecked because literally my parents got divorced and my dad left the church at the same time, so I'm like, "Okay, like, everything's going to crap now,"
Everybody's
like
abandoning you.
yeah, yeah, I was terrified, and I was like, "This is gonna ruin our marriage," because I thought that was, you know, maybe just, like, inevitable, since that's what happened with my parents. So
Mm,
I
right.
was terrified, and we were trying to work through things, and it was a really rough couple of years. But what ended up happening is it just forced us to talk more, and it forced me to ask more questions. And so then I started asking him, like, well, why do you not believe? Like, why do you not, if we have kids, like, because we talk about what are we going to do when we have kids? Why do you not want me reading the Book of Mormon to our kids? Why do you not want me taking our kids to church and stuff? So then he started answering me and was like, well, because of this and this and this, and he had all these like reasons, and they were reasons that actually started to get me questioning, like, wait, what? Like, stuff about the anachronisms in the Book of Mormon, stuff about Joseph Smith, and stuff about just the way that the church was founded, the way polygamy was run, all these things started to pop up. And I started to have a lot more sympathy for him because I was like, oh, he's not just this like evil,
Wanting to sin.
yeah, Satan-ridden person that just wants to sin. Like, he has legitimate fears and concerns. And I was like, oh, wow. Like, okay, so he's like just a human being that is freaked out.
And it's
And
just information, right?
yeah, yeah,
It's information. We have a court system where people present both sides of their thing, and a jury or whatever sometimes just has to decide based on the information which way they're going to believe. And sometimes juries are hung. They can't all agree, and that can be what happens in Mormonism. Some people can hear everything and still decide, the Lord has to work with imperfect men, and there's going to be mistakes. And other people are like, it's kind of too many mistakes for a perfect God to make, sort of. And so
yeah,
there's a whole spectrum of beliefs that you can still have no matter what happens. But so you are have decided, or did we get to the point where you finally decided, or go ahead and finish that?
yeah, yeah. So it was just at that point, I remember I was starting to see Jared through this lens with a lot more compassion and love and understanding. And it was starting to get me to question because I'm like, oh, wait, he has like the Book of Mormon. Wait, what? And so I started looking into these things a little more. And at the same time, I was getting a lot of pushback at church because I would talk about how I was struggling, scared of what was going to happen to my marriage. And my friends would say things like, you should just divorce him because right now he doesn't believe in the church and soon he's just going to be paying for prostitutes. Like, literally that dramatic of an incline, expectation. They're like, oh, he's going to
Right.
become
It
an
took many
alcoholic,
years for him
he's
to start
gonna
paying for prostitutes, right?
yeah, yeah, it's a gateway
Still
drug.
hasn't
and
happened.
and so I was getting really offended by people saying these things because I was like, they're saying this stuff, and I know that they're saying it because like they're told to say that. Like, literally, I think there was one of the apostles that said there's only 3 good reasons to leave a spouse: abuse, um, cheating, and apostasy. Apostasy is one of them. And I was like, okay, so they're telling me this because that's like one of the few reasons why you should actually leave your spouse. But I was grappling with that and feeling so confused because I was like, I think Jared really loves me. Like, I think he really cares about me. I don't think he's going to cheat on me. Like, I don't think he's going to become an alcoholic. Like, and so I started challenging this narrative, and also, in conjunction with that, hearing all this stuff as I'd asked Jared questions, hearing all these reasons that he didn't believe, it just all started to crumble. And I think the thing that really kind of threw the hammer down for me was when I heard that Joseph Smith had used the seer stones to do like that treasure digging stuff. That shattered me because I was like, that sounds like just such hogwash, that I don't understand how you can be like, "Oh yeah, this thing I was using to like scam people for money, I'm now using to translate for God." Like that just felt like there's no way. That in conjunction also with him marrying young girls, to me, I was like, I don't feel comfortable believing in a God that would tell you you have to marry an underage girl. And so it came down to this, okay, either God is kind of an asshole or Joseph Smith just wasn't a prophet. And I felt more comfortable believing Joseph Smith wasn't a prophet rather than feeling comfortable thinking that, oh, God wants some 35-year-old guy to be hooking up with young girls. Like, it just felt so icky to me. So that was kind of when the hammer really came down, and I was at that point really just I didn't feel like I could come back from that.
Right. And so this, I know that the church showed pictures of the seer stone that Joseph Smith had about the same time they purchased from the Community of Christ the original printer's manuscript, or maybe it's one of those two. And so that was around 2015 or 2016 where this is happening for you, or a little bit after that?
I don't I don't know. I don't remember when that came out. All I remember is that when I was growing up, it was all I ever saw was the it didn't look like the rocks, it was like the
The
glasses.
Urim and Thummim is what they would
Yeah,
say they were. Yeah.
yeah.
And so, but so you didn't start your podcast right away. Were you doing any other
Right.
creative work at the time?
Right. So the timeline was that it was around 2018 when I finally was like, I don't think I believe. And that was also when we had our first child. And so at that point it was crazy because I'm becoming a mom for the first time and losing my religion at the same time, and I was just terrified. And I one of the ways that I tried to cope with it was by starting my spiritual life channel. So that's how that was born. Was I was feeling lonely, I was feeling scared, I was feeling really depressed because Mormonism wasn't just my religion, it was my personality, it was my way of trying to cope with being scared of what other people thought of me. It was this way I could, you know, put put myself on this pedestal of being a good person. I'm this good Mormon girl, and I couldn't do that anymore. And all these fears were coming in as far as fears of what my ward members were going to think of me, fears of what my family was going to think of me. I was the only person outside of my dad. So I had five siblings, and of course, all my extended family. There was a couple aunts that were out at that time, but I just felt like very much the pioneer in a way because I was the first of my siblings. And anyway, so I started the channel because I kind of wanted a community, and I wanted some validation. And I also remember just feeling like at the time that I left, there was starting to be more ex-Mormon content, but there wasn't a lot. And a lot of it was people that were knee deep in their angry phase, and that was like too harsh for me. It was too harsh for my little like tenderly newly broken Mormon heart because there was still so much about Mormonism that I loved and appreciated, so it was really hard for me to hear people bashing it really hard. And so I was like, maybe I could be like a softer landing pad for some people. So that was originally kind of what happened when I started the channel. Was I was just talking about, I have this issue with the church, or I'm having this issue with my family because of not going to church, and like me just talking about my feelings and trying to be this space where I could provide people some sympathy and community, but with less of the anger. That's
and
kinda how it started.
provide a therapeutic release for yourself at the same time.
Absolutely, yeah, I found it incredibly cathartic to voice all my feelings, and then to watch it back on camera, and it was so validating. It was so just sitting there and just hearing myself talk about my own feelings was extremely helpful and cathartic.
Yeah. So what was it like? You bought a podcasting kit with a ring light, or did you just open up a laptop? What'd you do?
Yeah, I think, I started with an old cell phone, and
Cell phone.
I had to set up a mirror on a stand so that I could see if I was in the shot, so I'd have to position the mirror so I could point the mirror at the back of the cell phone so I could anyway, because I could put it on selfie mode, but then it wouldn't be
Right, it'd be reverse direction.
the better
If you
camera, yeah, and I
and if
didn't
you
have
had
a ring
writing
light,
or
so I
something,
put my desk up against a window so I could have the natural light come in anyway, so it was a
that's right.
very it
The
yeah,
early
I've got
days,
much nicer equipment now, which is really cool.
the early stages of podcasting.
It's such a beautiful thing, like, how cool is it that in this day and age, like, if you want to start a podcast, you can for very cheap, and you can get your ideas out there, and it's a
Yeah.
really cool thing, and so, my channel, surprisingly, initially kinda blew up, and I remember the first video that kinda blew up was when I was talking about this was when Nelson came out and said it was fall of it was either yeah, it was probably 2018. It was either fall of 2018 or spring of 2019 where Nelson came out and was like, "Mormon is a bad word now," basically, and I was furious. I was so angry, that made me really angry, and it kinda went a little bit viral, like and so then the channel started picking up, and so I
Do you
started
remember
working on
how
it
many views
more
you
and
got, like, in a week, or were you hitting refresh, updating the
Oh,
views?
it wasn't really that much. It just it went from, like, I was only getting, like, but, like, less than 100 views on every video to getting between, like, 1,000 and 5,000 views with every video. So, it was a for me, I was like, "Oh my god, 1,000 people or 5,000 people," like, it felt like a lot, and so the channel started doing better, in the thousands, I guess you could say, but I never had anything, like, go crazy viral. I think the most viewed video I had was reviewing the Book of Mormon musical, and it probably got, like, 40,000 views, which, of course, is a lot, but in YouTube terms, it's not, like, it's not insane. Anyway, so the channel started doing a lot better. People loved the dynamic too, because 'cause I'd have Jared on, and Jared's hilarious, and so we kind of were able to make a lot of different skits and things like that where we were able to laugh about it. So it was kind of this like vlog, but also we could laugh. And I just ended up um, kind of taking up more and more of this direction of like how to um, how to work through these issues with your family, how to work through your self-confidence issues, your self-esteem issues, and I just started loving that direction of things more and got more and more tired of talking about Mormonism after a while. After a while, I just felt like it was about 5 years of that, I think. So from
So so I
yeah.
remember watching your show in, like, maybe the end of 2020, and I remember being so jealous that these young kids were sounding so intelligent and coming up with such good reasons for things. And so had you, like, read a lot of books on things like psychology? Did you have other sort of interests in that area?
I think most of my wisdom all came from a lot of introspection and a lot of therapy. And then I did start reading a lot of books. Now I read a lot. I didn't read as much back then. I love reading now. I love reading. That's probably my favorite thing to read is things related to psychology, just like that, learning how your brain works, why you are the way that you are, I just find it so fascinating because there's so many people in the world and we're all so different, but we're all so similar in so many ways. And it's all just incredibly fascinating. And so I I mean, a lot of this love was stirred up too because because of my family dynamic being so unhealthy growing up, I was I struggled a lot with anxiety. I struggled a lot with mood swings, with depression, with just panic attacks. Like I struggled so much with my mental health. And so part of that fascination just came from like, how do I feel like a normal human being? Like, how do I get myself to stop crying all the time? It was like I was just kind of desperate to feel better. And so, anyway, so I think a lot of that wisdom came from just trying to understand myself, trying to understand why I was struggling in the ways that I was, and understanding how I could better the situation or better my perspective so that I didn't feel like I was so miserable all the time.
So you came up with the title Understanding You because you were trying to understand yourself.
Yeah, so I started to realize I very much when I left home when I left home after my parents got divorced, I was very scared that I would never get married and have a family, and it was because I had a lot of commitment issues, and I remember thinking if I don't figure out how to get to the bottom of these commitment issues, I'm never gonna have what I really want. What I really want is my own family. And so that, set me on that journey of trying to figure things out, and then as I started understanding myself, I started improving my life so much. I started feeling so much better about myself. I started dealing with my anxiety better. All of this like started to shift so much for me. And so it kind of clicked in my brain that like the best way I've been able to improve my life has actually been through understanding myself because that's where so much change happens. When you understand why you're doing what you're doing, then you can start to understand how you can change. When you understand what's holding you back from doing things you want to do, then you know what to work on to propel you forward. So when I was getting tired of the Mormon content, I was talking to a friend of mine, Cody. You should get him on here sometime. He's great. He does the Uber Mormon channel. I was talking to him and I was like, I really like I've loved this Mormon channel, but like I just feel like I need to take my content in a different direction, and because my heart's just not in it anymore. After a while, it's a beautiful place to get to when you're like, I don't want to talk about Mormonism anymore. It's great because it just shows that, you're maturing past that,
We could put
I
a link to Cody's channel in the description when we publish this. And
yeah,
so
yeah.
that way people can see that as well. And so you were
Oh,
talking to him and
and he's like, if you could whittle down like, you know, the most important thing you would want to teach people, what would
it's
it
like,
be?
here's everything about psychology that we know. Try to find this and talk about it.
Exactly, exactly. And it hit me right away. And I remember because I had just been reading um Ryan Holiday's Daily Stoic book, and he had this great quote in there about how self-knowledge is freedom. And I was like, that's exactly it because we think that we're free. We think we have free will, right? But we have it to the extent that all of our fears and insecurities aren't stopping us, right? Or so often we think like, oh, I could do this if only I had time, but really it's more of like a I'm scared, right? And why am I scared and how can I overcome this fear? And so when he said to me, like, if you had to whittle your message down, what would it be? And I was like, it would be understanding you because it all kind of clicked in my brain that the way I got past my commitment issues, the way I got past my anxiety, the way I got past all of these things, the way I got through leaving the church was through understanding myself, having that compassion for myself because understanding myself allowed me to actually navigate forward, more effectively. So I got so excited when that all kind of clicked for me, and this was just like a year ago.
It's almost like you had a revelation.
It's almost like I had a revelation, although I won't call it that, for good
We'll
reason,
just
but
say our brains are amazing.
our brains are amazing and interesting and fascinating and frustrating, right? Because our brains, the interesting thing about it is that our brains try so hard to protect us that they end up fucking us over. And that can be extremely, extremely frustrating. But it's all so beautiful. It's like, okay, my brain is trying to protect me. Like, how can I learn to deal with this in a way that, is not impeding my progress? Because as a child, you learn, like, oh, if I don't want to get disappointed, I need to stop expecting things. And it's like, that's terrible carrying that into adulthood. Like, I'm just not going to expect anything good. That's terrible because then you're not going to aim for anything good. So, just like understanding these things has been so powerful to me. And it made me so excited because I was like, this is a topic that can grow with me, a topic that has a lot of versatility to it because I can talk about anxiety stuff, I can talk about perfectionism stuff, I can still talk about Mormonism stuff, but it's more broad and it has more of a growth opportunity to it. And so I have been, slowly transitioning over from my spiritual life over to this new Understanding You channel, and I am loving it, and I am just so excited about it. I'm excited to have a channel that has a
A lot of
message that I'm
potential.
so passionate about. I'm so passionate about it because I
Like,
think go ahead, go ahead.
oh, even though you've been able to narrow down the focus a little bit, the audience is pretty much humans.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely, and what a beautiful thing, like, some of my best and most beautiful experiences in my life have been healing moments, whether it's with me or with someone else. And I just get to think about and work on that all the time now. Like, and I love it. And I love having a place where I can share the insights from the books that I'm reading. Um, because it's really exciting to feel like, oh, when I read something from a book that I'm so excited about, it's really cool to feel like I have someone to share with, and right now it's a camera, but it still feels like, it just feels
Right.
like, you know, it's going somewhere, it's doing something, it's making good of the information I'm learning, and I think I internalize it better when I am learning how to vocalize the things that I'm learning in ways that other people can relate to it. So I think it's just
And,
making that healing for myself that much deeper.
and people comment. You can learn from the comments and, explore, or they might want to dive a little deeper into something. You can maybe share something with a commenter, tell them like where to go get a book or something like that on that subject or something like that. And so
It
I
is
know it's the new year, and you probably have, an idea that maybe you should try to get this channel promoted more. And that's what I'm going to help you with. And I'm going to
yeah.
tease to everybody that you can find out so much about Morgan. You'll be telling your friends about this person that you're discovering. So Morgan, thank you so much for coming on Latter Daily Digest. Everyone, if you can like and subscribe and head on over to Morgan's channel, check it out, see what you can learn about yourself. And want everybody to know that we're excited about this year, 2024. I like even number years than I like odd number years. I don't know if it has something to do with, left hand, right hand, left hand's called sinister or whatever, but the
Gotta
even
understand
numbers,
yourself to figure it out. Yep.
that's right. That's right. So everybody head on over to Morgan's channel, like and subscribe, and have a good new year. Thank you
Bye.
very much.